Now, Kev, was gambling part of gang culture back then?
Man, listen when I tell you, we shot dice everywhere, man. Picnics, after funerals, during school, after school. We shot dice on Crenshaw Boulevard, man. Daytime, nighttime. We right there rolling the dice, man. I'm telling you. Back then, early 80s, weekends was all about Westwood, Whittier Boulevard in East LA, and Hollywood Boulevard in Hollywood, because the pretty women admired the lowriders. So they would hang out on Crenshaw, where we was at, on Sundays. We were known to get the ballers in the opposition problems. This was Crenshaw Boulevard, home of the Rolling 60s. You either rode with us, or you got rolled on. Very few sets would even dare to hit the Shaw and rep their set. The CC Riders, the Grape Streets, they was the only ones that I could recall who I ran across and was bold enough to keep it 100 all the time, despite the circumstances. But everybody knew when you hit between Florence and Slauson, you was looking for it. If you hit that light on 63rd and Crenshaw, you better look out. Most people ran that light. People wouldn't even stop at that light because it was a danger zone. Straight up, homie. We come up out of the dice game and get the busting on it. Walk out of the dice game and take your card from it. I'm talking about the 1980s when drug sales was lucrative. Batarang was serious. It's the Reagan era, fool, when everybody was having it their way. Everybody had money, cars, and nice jewelry.
I understand that you did some time for robbery. Can you give us some more detail about that conviction and the circumstances surrounding that case?
I went to prison for probation violation, in which I was sentenced to 3 years in prison, 4 years for robbery, count 1, 4 years for robbery, count 2. That's 11 years in total. It was ran concurrent with halftime. I was accused of the home invasion robbery of NBA star Benoit Benjamin and his bodyguards. It was alleged that me and my crime partners disarmed the bodyguards, took an undisclosed amount of money, Rolexes, and other jewelry, along with the kidnapping. And so that's what I went to prison for. The kidnapping charges didn't stick, but as it turns out, there was a lot of wiretapping going on in the hood. And so those phone conversations helped lead to convictions.
Now, how prevalent is gangbanging in the California prison system?
It's very prevalent. It's predominant, widespread. The prisons ran by gangs, the Southern Rasa, La Emet, Crips, Bloods, New Africans. That's where the power is. The power is in numbers. The power is in structure. The prison is overpopulated with gangbang activity.
So, Kev, the first time you went to prison and really had to do some time, what was it like?
I didn't hit the prison system till my mid-20s. By the time I hit CDC, California Department of Non-Corrections, I'm going to be honest, it was kind of watered down. But you got to put that in perspective. Level 3 is the highest I hit. And then I did most of my time on level 2. I never seen a level 4. Level 4 is what's cracking. When you hear all these stories about California prison, it's usually a level 4. Mink goes down on a 3, a 2, and I've even heard of it going down on a 1. But the points are so low, and 9 times out of 10, we're on our way out the system. And so I couldn't give you a good, nice, how can I say it, scared straight type of story, because I wasn't on no level 4. But I seen some shit on level 3, and believe it or not, seen a lot of shit on level 2. So the thing is this, when you ask about rivals, when you from 60s, damn near everybody your rival. When you from neighborhood, when you from that old, you got a lot of enemies, man. You hit them prison yards, you gotta keep that name up. If you don't keep the name up for yourself, if you don't keep your moniker up or your last name up, you gotta keep the hood up. That's one thing you gotta do. When you come from a reputable hood, you gotta rep that shit, man. You can't be no punk, you can't be no buster. You can't let your homies find out you punked the gang, because then it's gonna be worse. You're gonna get your ass rolled up.
I want you to tell the people, man, what was it like growing up under that Chief Daryl Gates, man, with the Ramparts Division and the crash units? Because we had something similar, man. Rudolph Giuliani came to New York, and he came with the quality of life laws, man, no loitering, and started just shaking up the communities, sending a lot of people to jail for marijuana charges and things of that nature. And I know you guys went through a similar situation.
Daryl Gates probably wasn't much different from Giuliani. He was a Klansman in an LAPD uniform. Chief Gates, going back to the 1984 Olympics, tried to clean up the area to make the Olympics a safe place since there was world attention. And his crash unit, his crash officers, they came out with Operation Hammer. So between like 84 and 87, they really applied a lot of pressure on the black community. We talking about officers that did not live in our communities. We talking about black turncoats that worked for the LAPD, but would come into their own neighborhoods, man, and show out more than the white police officers. I mean, it was total chaos if you was a gang member. If you was black, period, LAPD was jacking you up, dog. I remember sometime in the 80s, they had hit the Rolling 30s, the Harlem Crips on Darden Avenue. If you from LA, you probably remember the Darden Avenue raids. And the police was nothing but a gang, man. They was spray painting on the walls, just tearing up property like they was gangbanging. Some malicious dudes, man, with ill intent. And they were crooked. They were a gang, man, I'm telling you. That's what they was. And that's what they did to us in those days. They had no regard for a black life, no regard for a black human being living in his own community, minding his own business, man, I'm telling you. Southwest PD, 77th Street Division. They were on our ass in the hood. I remember in 1988, after the Westwood shootings, they was on my ass, man. Especially this one white officer, we called him Mays. Mays pulled me over every car I had, looking for a stash spot, looking for guns. And he would always give me a roll call, homies that he said was snitching. But you could never take a police at his word, because they known to infiltrate and try to agitate and start shit within the hood. So I would keep the names to myself, but I was always conscious of it. And now in hindsight, I think dude was really trying to tip us off and let us know. There's a lot of homies who wasn't no good during that era, man, because so much pressure was being applied by the LAPD. Dudes was getting so much money. They wasn't ready to trade that in for no sale in the penitentiary, you know what I mean?
You was around for the Rodney King riots. Can you paint a picture of the temperature of South Central when the riots popped off? And can you follow that up with the peace treaty?
I was actually coming from Las Vegas during the time of the 92 riots. LA was on fire, man. All you could hear was sirens and you see smoke. And so I walked from downtown to LA and you could just smell smoke like there had been a big serious war and people were looting stores. Everybody was in survival mode. And then they called the National Guard. And the homies, we would gather up in different homies' houses, gambling, drinking, talking. And the police and National Guard would come with us. We would throw bottles at them, shoot guns up in the air. It was crazy. It was like we were in a third world country, man. And they were trying to take over South Los Angeles. And so a lot of black gangs got together. We decided to truce and meet up. I believe it was started by some brothers in Watts. Watts was most known for the peace treaty and making it work. And kind of all of Los Angeles got into it. I'll never forget, we met up with the Hoovers at Manchester Park and the 8-Track Gangsters. And they kicked a lot of stories around about how they wish they could have came on Crenshaw, how the violence needs to stop. And we talked about how our toughest rivals were one another. And we talked about the wars, how some of us were lucky to survive the wars. People asked about guys that they knew from before the war years. And now they wondering where these guys are. Are they still living? How they doing? But the police did their best to keep us from coming together. And the peace treaty was broken within a matter of days. As far as my community go, my area, with our fiercest rivals. Inglewood family wasn't willing to truce. And we wasn't trying to truce. The LAPD and their plan worked, their tactic worked. They ruined the peace treaty. Because if they hadn't, they may have lost jobs.
Can you explain what the Compton swap meet is and what the Compton swap meet meant to the city of Compton?
The Compton swap meet was the super Walmart before there was a Walmart. It was your one-stop shop for music, mixtapes, rims, tinted windows, hip hop clothing, gang attire, just everything that you needed was right there. Swap meets was a popular thing in the early 80s throughout LA County. You had the Rhodium Swap Meet, the Slauson Swap Meet, Inglewood Swap Meet, etc., etc., etc. The thing about the Compton Swap Meet was it was on Long Beach Boulevard. Long Beach was cracking. You had everything on Long Beach. It was just a popular street, man. It was always popping. And anything could go down on that street at any given time, especially because it bordered two cities. There was a lot of Pyrus and a lot of Crips that went to the swap meet. So you was always going to get into a good fight or see a shootout, always on the news, always making news. It was a hot spot for gang activity.
Now, as of recent, that Rolling 60 set has become really popular due to the demise of the late Nipsey Hussle. Rest in peace to Nip. You being from the Rolling 60s, is that the same set that Nip claimed?
There's only one West Side Rolling 60 neighborhood Crip on Crenshaw and Slauson, bro. Nip was hood. Nip was official. And that's what makes him so special. He took Crenshaw and Slauson and he made that shit global. He left that shit to be a landmark, bro. So shout out to Nip, rest in peace, and to his whole family.
Recently, Wack 100 was quoted as saying Nipsey Hussle was not a legend. So what do you think when guys make those type of statements about people that are no longer here to defend themselves? Nipsey Hussle, in my book, is legendary because he did legendary things. But some of these guys that mention his name could only hope that when they're long gone, that they're remembered the way that Nipsey is going to be remembered.
Nipsey Hussle, he was legendary. And I don't say that lightly. Nip took what we f***ed up and he legitimized it. He legitimized it to the point where the Marathon clothing became a tourist spot. He made everybody I spoke to in my hood happy and proud. Everybody I spoke to loved Nip. You know, when Nip was still here with us, my square homies would call me. They would call and we would talk about Nip. We would guess where he would be in 5 years or 10 years. We would talk good on achievements that he accomplished. Every time he reached a new height, we was happy for him. Ain't no one going to get anywhere trying to tear the next man down, especially after he's already departed this earth. Nip will only be viewed in great light, as he should. His flesh has been killed, but his energy and his spirits live forever. And so for a man to pass and people talk about him, that's disgraceful. That's low budget, bottom of the barrel, in the gutter with it. You know, I learned my lesson when I spoke on Dead Rival once. I spoke my truth. I spoke the real, and people had a problem with it. And so I learned my lesson. You let the dead rest in peace.
What's your opinion on the gang culture taking over New York and even across the world?
To see New York saying Bloods is everywhere, or Brims is everywhere, or Stones is everywhere in New York, it's laughable. Now, I'm not laughing at the fact that they claiming blood. I'm not laughing at the fact that they banging in New York. I'm laughing at the fact that history tells us New York shitted on California for gangbanging back in the days. The late 70s, early 80s, New York despised gangbanging in Los Angeles. That's a fact. And so years later, after Colors and Monster Cody's book, I'm talking 88 to 93, 94, 95, 96, after the riots, after all these different movies, it's crazy to me because now y'all doing what California did.
I see you have an interview featuring Monster Cody. Does Monster Cody know how influential his book was to the non-trade gangsters forming in New York City? Because I've seen a couple interviews where guys are quoted saying that OG Mac started the Bloods after he read the book by Monster Cody. What's your opinion on that?
There's no doubt in my mind the non-trade gangster Bloods was started because of the book written by Sayika Shakur, aka Monster Cody. Now I asked Monster Cody, was he aware of that? And he said no. He couldn't speak on it because he didn't know nothing about it. So that was a fair answer. But you gotta remember, Monster Cody's been in state prison all these years. Monster get out, he go right back. So Monster ain't all over the internet like a lot of us because he was always in prison and he was out here on the streets on the run and being Monster Cody. doing Monster Cody things. As he says, he was the drug tester. Whenever somebody bought drugs, he would raise his hand and ask, could he be the tester? So Monster had a lot going on. He's not in a loop like that. Even though he traveled to New York recently, he may have some New York connections. New York dudes might have wrote him while he was in prison. But the way he responded to me, he was unaware of anything like that. When I made that scenario on one of my live streams, dudes wanted to crucify me. I was getting hate mail on Instagram. I was getting hate mail on my emails. People was talking shit about me. Say I didn't know what I was talking about. They was testing my credibility and trying to shit on me. And so now, a year later, 1 year later, 12, 13 months later, I see these interviews with these New York brothers admitting their truths, admitting their knowledge of where it came from. I see them looking at Mac sideways in a lot of aspects, not in his earlier days, but after he supposedly went the way he wasn't supposed to go. And now people can say it and people are embracing it. And I'm like, wow, that's so powerful. I'm happy that they're embracing it. I'm happy that they don't have those ill feelings toward those brothers. But I'm like, damn, in the motherland, where it all started, where the C and the B and the P was planted, say something. Learn your history. You got 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should be able to listen more than you talk.
Now, this may be a little bit of a touchy subject, but how many close homies did you lose to the streets? And if so, which one hit you the hardest?
Obviously, growing up in the streets of Los Angeles, I lost a lot of good friends due to gang violence over the decades. One of the first ones that really hurt was Earl Arthur Wilson, better known as Lil Looney. Earl was a childhood friend of mine. We attended elementary school together, played over each other's house. He would visit my house often. I remember when Earl started pop locking, started going to juvenile hall, wearing the Levi 501s creased up, the dick kickers, just the whole get down, the afros, the cake cutters, the lokes, everything. You know, it just makes me smile just reminiscing on Lil Looney. But having friends getting killed in the early 80s and mid 80s, Earl died in December 1990, and it really hurt. Earl's death hurt because I've known him for so long and we have been so close over the years. And just the love that he showed me and the love that I have for him makes his death one of the ones that stand out.
You speak highly about your mom that passed away. Now, how influential was she in your life?
It took being in the penitentiary to realize what an extraordinary influence my mother was in my life. She was the kind of woman that always had time for her kids and grandkids. She was down for any cause, would sacrifice her love and freedom for family and friends, and most certainly the best woman I ever met. It was her that taught me no matter what I thought of my father and my uncle, at the end of the day, they would still be my father and my uncle. She taught me unconditional love. She taught me to love and respect family. And she taught me what it was to have somebody's back. You see, my mother was the type, she would hide guns and drugs. She would intervene if law enforcement was trying to raid the house, or if we were on a police chase. Whatever it was, my mother was always there and willing to put herself and her freedom on the line for her kids and even my friends. You know, my mother was really like the mother of the community for those that hung out at my house, whether it was criminal activity or whether we was just being targeted by police for no reason. You know, my mother taught me what it was not to snitch. You know, she'd take a case if she had to for one of her kids.
And what became of your Uncle Jody?
When my Uncle Jody got out of prison, he just mainly became a family man and lived off old money. He had enough money put up to where he was able to live off that money. And he had this camper he used to like to travel in. So he would get me and all my cousins, and we would travel up north, back to Los Angeles, different things like that. Jody died about 20 years ago of natural causes.
I never asked you, what became of your pops, man? How your pops doing, man?
My father moved to Memphis, Tennessee, where basically he retired. He began working with my auntie, his sister, on a lot of things and businesses that she had going on. And he kept a lot of young women. He kept a lot of pretty women. He had a few older women with a lot of money. He began playing the lottery a lot and became addicted to the casinos. And I would go out there and visit him a lot. I would send my weed out there and he would hook me up with people. I would get rid of the weed. We would go to strip joints and go out eating to a lot of places, a lot of soul food restaurants. We would travel the country and he would just give me a lot of knowledge, man. And he kind of like felt bad about some of the things he did and didn't do in my lifetime. And he expressed remorse. And he caught cancer, full-blown cancer. He had all sorts of cancer. And it took him out fast, man. He got diagnosed in December. By April, he had passed. And so he will truly be missed. You know, he left me with a lot of knowledge and good information.
Can you tell the people how you made the transition from being in the streets to being a legitimate businessman? Now, you founded All Hood Publications, which is an urban magazine. Can you briefly tell us how All Hood Publications was born?
I used to be on the internet all the time, man, and I came up with an idea to do a magazine on the gang culture. And this way I could put my letters in the magazine. I could put females, models in the magazine, lowriders in the magazine, tattoos in the magazine, and I could put poetry, inmate mail. I could just put a variety of things in that magazine, man, and I could send it to the prisons. And that way I could look out for all the homies and all the dudes that got caught up in the gang shit or that urban culture or the people missing home. They can enjoy that shit in prison just through one magazine. That way I wouldn't have to write all the homies and stay in contact with all the homies. They could just get a subscription and kill 10 birds with one stone.
Now, you also created the Kev Mack YouTube channel, where you document the history of LA gangs and interview OGs from different sets. How did you get into doing the whole YouTube channel thing?
I started the YouTube thing for a number of reasons. I would like to tell them all to you, but it would take too long. And it's too many to just put my finger on one. But the bottom line is, history is fascinating. History is interesting. And history is important. And so it's important for us to know where we came from, how and why. That way we can figure out where we're going.
What would you say to a kid that's just on the fence right now, not sure what direction he wants to go in life? And with all your life experiences, what would be some of the best advice for a kid at that crossroad in life? What would you tell him?
I would tell a kid like my mother told me, all your friends ain't really your friends. And when you get in trouble with those so-called friends, they're gonna tell on you. Best advice, most realest shit, most accurate shit my mother ever taught me. Real talk, bro. And that shit really happened to me, man. And I seen it happen to so many other people, man. Pledge your honor, your integrity, your love to your family, which we consider the neighborhood, your homeboys, your homies. And these dudes will rat you out, my nigga, because they want that freedom. They not ready to give up their freedom for you. They will tell on you. They will roll over on you in a heartbeat. And it's gotten so bad. These dudes can come back to the street now, come back to the block like nothing ever happened. And people gonna embrace them. And if you say something about it, they gonna look at you like you the one that's wrong. So mama was right, man. Every friend ain't really your friend. And them niggas will tell on you.